At an abandoned airstrip just outside the city, a little boy sneaks in every day to watch a rusted, grounded airplane. But inside, there's an old man who's been living there for 37 years. The boy's curiosity turns to awe when he learns the old man wasn't always poor. He once flew this very plane as a pilot with a tragic secret that no one ever believed. But now, as the boy uncovers the truth hidden inside the cockpit, the world learns why the man never left the plane and what he's been waiting for all these years. The boy wasn't supposed to be there. He had slipped past the rusted chain-link fence of the forgotten airfield, his tiny feet crunching over weeds that had broken through the cracked tarmac. Beyond the dry wind and creaking silence stood a single, haunting silhouette, a grounded aircraft, silver skin dulled by time, wings outstretched like they were still remembering how to fly. It looked abandoned, but it wasn't. He climbed a stack of old tires and peeked into the dusty window. That's when he saw him, an old man sitting in the cockpit, still, unmoving, eyes closed like he was somewhere else entirely. The boy froze, heart pounding. He expected the man to shout, to scare him off. Instead, the old man opened his eyes slowly, turned toward him, and smiled. Not kindly, not warmly, but as if he'd been expecting him. "You're late," he said softly. "I've been waiting for someone." The boy didn't run. Something about the man's voice wasn't threatening. It was hollow, like a forgotten echo in an empty hallway. It made the boy curious. So the next day, he came back. And the next. Every day, he sat just outside the plane, asking questions. The old man would sit in his pilot seat, hands resting on the wheel, talking in fragments. About clouds. About a girl named May. About something he lost midair and never found again. "Did you really fly this?" the boy finally asked one day, his eyes wide. The old man didn't reply. He simply reached under his seat and pulled out a photo. The boy leaned in. It was a black and white picture. The old man, decades younger, standing beside the same aircraft, a woman leaning against his arm, laughing like the world had never hurt her. "This plane used to be my home in the sky," he said, voice cracking, "until I brought it down and never left." He wouldn't explain further. Not yet. But the boy was hooked, and he kept coming back. One stormy afternoon, lightning cracked the sky, and the boy raced toward the airfield, soaked and shivering. He climbed into the plane for the first time, trembling from the cold. The old man didn't scold him. Instead, he pulled a blanket from the back and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. The cockpit smelled of metal, oil, and time. Yet something about it felt safe. "Tell me what happened," the boy whispered. The old man looked out the cracked windshield. Rain traced lines like tears across the glass. "There were screams," he said quietly. "The engine was on fire. I had 146 lives in my hands that day." The boy held his breath. "I landed it, but I lost her. My co-pilot, May." His voice broke. "She was more than my co-pilot. She was my everything." Silence filled the space between them like smoke. "I never flew again," the man added. "Not because they didn't let me, but because I couldn't lift off without her." The boy stared at the control panel, fascinated by the switches, the levers, the worn-out dials. "Why live here?" he asked gently. "Why not go home?" The old man looked at him, tired eyes brimming with something between grief and faith. "This is my home now, because one day someone will come, someone who needs this story, and maybe, just maybe, they'll take it to the skies again." He smiled faintly, then added, "You're the first who stayed." The boy didn't fully understand, but he nodded, because in his heart, he felt it, that this wasn't just about an old man and a broken plane. It was about something still alive inside it. Hope. Days turned into weeks. The boy started bringing food, a flashlight, even an old radio he found in his dad's garage. They talked about flight paths, radio codes, how to steer through turbulence. The old man taught him how to start the engine, not to fly, but to listen. "It doesn't roar anymore," the old man said once. "But if you listen close, you'll hear May." Then, one day, the boy asked, "Can I see the black box?" The man went still. I thought you didn't know about that, he said after a pause. My uncle's a pilot, the boy replied. He told me it's where the truth lives. The old man stared at him for a long moment, then stood. For the first time, he moved to the back of the plane, pulled back a loose panel, and revealed a small metal case. He placed it in the boy's hands. I've never played this for anyone, he said. But maybe it's time. The boy looked at the recorder. His fingers trembled. Then he pressed play. A woman's voice crackled through static.
Come. Clear. Brave.
Engine failure. Smoke in cabin. Altitude dropping. We're going to attempt a water landing. If we don't make it, tell James the first forgive him. The boy looked up. The old man's name was James. And suddenly, the entire airfield felt different, like the earth itself was holding its breath. He understood now. This plane wasn't a prison. It was a grave, a sanctuary, and a promise. A place where grief stayed suspended in the sky, waiting for someone to carry it forward. And maybe, just maybe, that someone had finally arrived. The boy didn't come for 2 days. The airstrip sat quiet, the rusted plane humming only with wind and memory. Inside the cockpit, James sat still, staring at the dark control panel like it might flicker to life. His hands rested on the yoke, not to fly but to feel. When the boy returned on the 3rd day, he wasn't alone. He brought a notebook, taped pages, drawings of wings and clouds. A school project, he said, but the truth was written all over his wide, excited eyes. I told my teacher about you, he said. And she said this story should be told. James blinked. Your teacher believes in ghosts. The boy shrugged. She believes in heroes. And I think you were one, even if no one else saw it. James looked away, jaw clenched. There are no heroes in crashes, kid. Only survivors. And names carved into metal. But the boy wouldn't back down. He climbed into the seat beside James, uninvited, and opened his notebook. On the first page, he'd written, Captain James Whitmore, the pilot who stayed. James stared at it. Then slowly a tear rolled down his cheek. No one had said his full name in over a decade. Not without anger, pity, or silence. The boy asked more questions now. Deeper ones. What was she like? May. James smiled. The kind of smile that hurts your face because it's reaching back through time. She wasn't like anyone. She didn't walk. She flew, even when her feet touched the ground. He paused. She taught me how to breathe in the clouds, and how to fall without fear. The boy listened like the world was ending, and this was the last story ever told. She loved storms, James continued. Said they reminded her life is never calm for long. Is that why you won't leave the plane? The boy asked. Because it's where you last saw her? James didn't answer, but the silence said enough. That evening, the boy brought a surprise. A laptop. It's old, he said, but it has Wi-Fi. James squinted at it like it was a foreign object. The boy opened a browser and searched something. Then he turned the screen toward him. A headline glared across the screen. Pilot error, likely cause of tragedy. Flight 73 crash still under investigation. James flinched. Beneath it, an image. Him in uniform. Younger. Cold eyes. A single sentence under it. He should have saved her. James looked away, but the boy wasn't done. There's a comment section, he said quietly. It's still open. James didn't speak. Would you like to say something back? James shook his head slowly. I said it already for 37 years, but no one listened. The boy paused, then clicked new comment. He began typing. My name is Eli. I'm 11. I met the pilot. He didn't run. He stayed. He listens to her voice every day. He lives where it happened, because he never stopped caring. James stared at the words. His hand hovered over the laptop. Then he reached out and pressed post. Something changed after that. James started cleaning the inside of the plane. He dusted the controls, rearranged the old flight manuals, even opened the emergency hatch for the first time in years. Sunlight poured through it like a second chance. Eli noticed. You're preparing for something. James gave a half smile. Maybe. Eli asked if they could go through the flight checklist. Just for fun. James hesitated, then nodded. Together, they read it aloud. Switch by switch. Button by button. James's voice grew stronger with each line. It was like watching someone remember who they used to be, not just a ghost of the past, but a man who once soared. Then one morning, Eli found the cockpit empty. The door was open. The seat cold. Panic surged in his chest. "James," he called, stepping outside. That's when he saw him. At the far end of the tarmac, standing alone, facing the sky. Eli ran to him. "I thought something happened to you," he said, breathless. James didn't turn. His eyes were on the clouds. "She's coming," he whispered. Eli frowned. "Who?" James looked down, smiled. "May." Before Eli could speak, the wind shifted, and in the distance, they both heard it. The low, thunderous rumble of an engine. A plane, a real one, approaching from above, carving through the sky like a memory reborn. James raised his hand like a salute. His eyes never left the clouds. Later that day, James gave Eli something he never expected, a letter. "Open it when I'm gone," he said. "Gone where?" Eli asked, voice suddenly thin. James didn't answer. He just walked back into the plane, closed the cockpit door, and sat. Eli waited outside for hours, but the plane stayed silent. That night, the lights on the airstrip flickered for the first time in years. Eli opened the letter. "If you're reading this, then I've finally flown. Maybe not in this body, but in memory. You brought me back, Eli. You gave me my wings again. This plane was never my prison, it was my penance. But you were my runway. Thank you for being my final passenger." Tears rolled down Eli's cheeks. The next morning, the plane was empty. James was gone. But something had shifted. The cockpit now held a framed photo of May and James together. And beneath it, the same line from Eli's notebook, now carved into the control panel. Captain James Whitmore, the pilot who stayed. The boy sat in the co-pilot seat, closed his eyes and listened. To the hum of the wind, to the echo of voices, and to the sound of a man who, after 37 years, had finally taken off. A year had passed. The plane still sat at the far end of the forgotten airstrip, silver and stubborn, weathered but unbroken, like a monument only a few knew the meaning of.
People came now.
Not many, but enough. Some brought flowers. Some brought letters. Some just stood there in silence, looking up at the cockpit window where the old man once sat, as if expecting to see him again. They never did. But the boy, Eli, he came every single day. Not because he was waiting, but because he was remembering. Inside the cockpit, nothing had changed. The photo of James and May still rested by the controls, framed in brass, with James's old wings pinned just beneath it. The control panel had been cleaned. The buttons still clicked. The seats still held the warmth of stories long finished. And in the corner, tucked behind the radio panel, was a small plaque Eli had saved all year for. It read, "For those who fly even after falling." The airstrip wasn't empty anymore, not just because of the people, but because of the energy, the feeling, as if something sacred had taken root in the silence James left behind. Eli had grown, not just taller, wiser. He'd learned to listen the way James did, not just to words, but to the space between them. He'd recorded their conversations, every story, every whisper, and now he played them back, not for himself, but for others. One afternoon, he brought a girl named Ava. She was new to town, quiet, with eyes that had seen too much for someone her age. Eli didn't tell her much, just led her to the cockpit and pressed play. James's voice filled the space, like a ghost you want to stay. There's a moment, right before the plane leaves the ground, when everything goes quiet. The engines scream, the wheels lift, and time stands still. Ava listened, said nothing. But when Eli looked over, she was crying, and she didn't want to leave. That night, she left a note tucked under the pilot's seat. "I lost someone too, but you helped me believe that maybe I'll find the sky again." News spread. Not viral, but slow, intentional, like a song passed from hand to hand. A retired flight attendant visited next. Then a boy whose father had died in a crash. Then a girl who wanted to be a pilot but had been told she wasn't strong enough. Eli greeted them all, not as a guide, but as a bridge, because that's what James had made him, a bridge between pain and peace. Then one day, a woman came, older, in her late 60s, wearing a navy blue scarf tucked tight around her throat. She stood by the plane for a long time, saying nothing, just watching the way the wind moved across the wings. Eli approached her gently. "You knew him, didn't you?" The woman's eyes welled instantly. "I was the last voice on the radio before they lost contact," she said. "I was ground control. I heard May's last words." Eli's breath caught. "I replayed that recording every night for 20 years, she whispered. "And when they shut the case down, I never forgave myself for not saving them." Eli didn't say anything. He just reached into the panel and pulled out the black box recorder, the one James had kept hidden for so long. He played it for her. Not just the final message, but everything. James talking to May. The calm in the chaos. The love in their voices, even as everything burned around them. The woman collapsed into the co-pilot seat, hands shaking, tears flowing freely. "He didn't run," she sobbed. "He stayed." Eli nodded. "That's why we're all here." Over the next few weeks, more came. Some brought tiny airplane models. Others brought sky maps or pages from James's old flight manual. Eli started pinning them on the walls of the aircraft. It was no longer just a plane. It was a living story. Every person who stepped in left a piece of themselves, and took a piece of James with them. Even the local mayor heard about it. She visited, sat in the captain's chair for 20 minutes without speaking, and when she left, she signed a paper that changed everything. The airstrip was declared a historical site. James's plane would never be torn down. Eli, now a teenager, stood outside one late evening, watching the sunset bleed across the metal skin of the aircraft. His fingers brushed over the chipped paint, tracing the same lines he'd followed since he was a boy. And then, a voice behind him. "You still talk to him?" Eli turned. It was his teacher, the one he'd first told about James years ago. "Every day," Eli said. "Just in my head now." She smiled. "You know, you've done something beautiful here." Eli looked back at the plane. "I didn't do it alone." Later that night, alone in the cockpit, Eli opened James's last notebook. There were pages Eli hadn't read before. Scribbled words. Flight plans that led to nowhere. Letters that never got sent. And, at the very back, a single message. Written in May's handwriting. "You were never meant to carry the sky alone." Eli closed the notebook and held it to his chest. For the first time, he allowed himself to cry. Not because he missed James, but because he finally understood what he left behind. Not just a plane. Not just a story. But a runway for all the broken hearts still learning how to fly again. The plane still doesn't move. Its wheels are frozen, rusted to the ground. But inside it, people soar. Because once upon a time, an old man stayed behind, not out of guilt, but out of love. And now, every time someone steps into that cockpit, sits in that seat, and hears his voice echo through the walls, James flies again. Say, what moral in comments? Like, share, and subscribe. Bye-bye.